What's up, horror fam? Welcome back to the channel. So for today's episode, we are getting another interpretation of the Mummy story coming to us from Lee Cronin. We also have Dakota Johnson and Josh Hartnett joining the cast for another film that's being adapted off of a novel, and the Poohniverse continues to expand. I don't think many of us saw this character getting put into the fold, so let's get into the details. Lee Cronin's The Mummy, Evil Dead Rise director's next horror movie gets official title. I know we've all seen the two iterations of the Mummy films that have been put out there. The first one was successful for the time with Brendan Fraser. Now the second go around wasn't successful as they were trying to create a monsters universe. And that first Mummy film pretty much came out, tanked, and killed the entire monsters universe that was going to be a kickoff for the studio. Didn't pan out, wasn't well received. But here we are back at the table again. We are now going to get another iteration of The Mummy. Fresh off last year's Evil Dead Rise, it was announced earlier this year that director Lee Cronin will next be directing an untitled horror movie from Blumhouse and James Wan's Atomic Monster. Today, Cronin took to Instagram to reveal the feature is Lee Cronin's The Mummy. This will be unlike any Mummy movie you ever laid eyeballs on before. I'm digging deep into Earth to raise something from ancient and very frightening, said writer-director Lee Cronin. Cronin is writing and directing the film produced by Atomic Monster, Blumhouse, and Doppelgangers for New Line. New Line Cinema will be releasing this one in theaters April 17th, 2026. Quote, collaborating with Jason, James, and the wonderful teams from these two storied and massively successful organizations is what perfect nightmares are made of, said Cronin. Getting to return to New Line Cinema and my wonderful partners over there is a cherry on top. Jason Blum said Cronin has an intriguing modern take on something quite ancient that I think audiences will love, while James Wan called the Evil Dead Rise director a gifted filmmaker in the world of horror whose storytelling has electrified audiences. As previously announced, Atomic Monster and Blumhouse are co-financing the film. James Wan, Jason Blum, and John Kevill are producers on the film. Michael Clear, Judson Scott, and Marketa Keller are executive producers. Alana Gassel is the executive overseeing the project for Atomic Monster. This is the first project under the Blumhouse Atomic Monster merger. And then we have down here, which is the announcement that they were talking about over on Instagram. If you were to click play, this bit cover up here underneath it says The Mummy, so when you click play you hear some background music and that scribble starts to disappear and it unveils the title The Mummy. Again, as we've mentioned before we even got into these details, we all know about the monsters universe that was previously attempted. They started off with The Mummy, it didn't end well, it pretty much just killed the entire universe and it hasn't been approach since, and now we have this one coming up. I do hope we get a true horror take on this version compared to the last two that we have seen. The first one was a product of its time with Brendan Fraser. We got the spin-off with the Scorpion King, which again was not a very successful film. And then we have the attempt at the Monsters universe with, again, as I mentioned, The Mummy, which didn't pan out well either. So they pretty much just killed the entire universe. But here we are again, years later. We're going to try to do The Mummy a third time, so let's hope it is a successful attempt. So our next topic, Verity, Dakota Johnson and Josh Hartnett join Anne Hathaway in adaptation of Colleen Hoover thriller novel. So you may recall in our last episode, we covered off on two other novels that are being adapted for film. One of them, The Housemaid, the other one, Victorian Psycho. Now here is our third novel that is going to be adapted into a film, and we have now additional casting for it. Last month, it was announced that Anne Hathaway had signed on to play the title character in the adaptation of It Ends With Us author Colleen Hoover's thriller novel, Verity. Now Deadline reports that she's being joined in the cast by Dakota Johnson and Josh Hartnett. Hathaway's character is Verity Crawford, a famous author who is unable to finish her latest thriller novel after a car accident leaves her badly injured and incapacitated. So her husband Jeremy offers a struggling writer named Lowen a huge sum of money to complete the remaining books in the series. Lowen accepts the gig but uncovers dark secrets in the process, including an unfinished manuscript that hints at a chilling admissions about Verity and her family's past, leaving Lowen to determine if Verity is a gifted fictionist or deranged psychopath. Johnson will play struggling writer Lowen Ashley, with Hartnett as Verity's husband, Jeremy Crawford. The very novel has a great opening line, "I hear the crack of his skull before the spattering of blood reaches me," end quote. Now that right there, I mean, that's the opening line for a book. I can only imagine, again, if you turn this into a film, what that opening scene could be if they stay true to that opening line and then kind of have it like a flashback or if it's something that's being shown from this past that's starting to unravel. And then that's something where we either begin the film with and then come back to towards the third act or the end of the film that wraps it all together. So this one seems, again, just based on that first bit, pretty dark, but I am appreciating the fact that they did give us a full synopsis, a premise for this. Typically on these novels, we get something that's only 2 or 3 sentences, and then we have to go out looking for a summary of what this could potentially be about. I'm glad with this one, we know up front what we're getting ourselves into. So this one seems to be pretty eerie. It can get pretty violent. Again, just based on that first line of the book. The Verity adaptation is coming our way from Amazon MGM and director Michael Showalter, who previously worked with Anne Hathaway on the idea of You, another adaptation of a popular book. And as I mentioned in the last episode, and I'll even state it here again, it seems like we're getting a lot of novels that are now being turned into either films or TV series. Now, I don't know, as I mentioned before, if this is going to be a short-term trend that we're going to see where maybe Hollywood has run out of ideas. Now we gotta turn to this type of source material to create new ideas for the genre, or if this is going to be something more long-term. And we have seen this from a long-term perspective when it comes to Stephen King. A lot of Stephen King's work over the decades has been turned from his novels and stories to films and TV series, and they still do today. This might be a new trend, or this might just be something that we just start seeing ourselves falling into, where Hollywood finds a great thriller horror novel and we start to then turn these into TV series and movies, or even movie franchises, right? I mean, some of these books that we covered last time, like The Housemaid, there's actually 3 books to that series. So if the first one is successful, they could eventually turn it into a trilogy of films. Now, we've seen that with other book franchises or book trilogies, like 50 Shades of Grey. We saw all those books turn into films. Now, they're not horror films. I'm just using it as an example of where we've seen right from the get-go, they're going to turn an entire book series into films. Another one would be like the Harry Potter series. They knew up front they're going to turn all these books into films. Now, for the horror genre, this might be a new avenue that they're going to start going down to say, let's tap into this work of all these authors with these great stories and let's start making some money that way. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, this is the 3rd story we've covered just in the last 2 episodes where we're seeing novels being adapted into feature films. All right, so going into our last topic for today, Poohniverse Monsters Assemble will include Mary Poppins, and it's going to be a bloodbath. That was probably the last sentence you thought you would ever hear in your life, that we're going to get a Mary Poppins into not just the Poohniverse, but just a horror version of Mary Poppins. This one took me a bit by surprise. I wasn't expecting to see Mary Poppins pop up at all in the Poohniverse, or even on their own version of a public domain horror film, but looks like they are going to be joining the Poohniverse Assemble project once we get that one released. We had heard that director Ray Frake Waterfield and producer Scott Jeffrey Chambers were planning to create a cinematic universe with the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey films, and other horror movies inspired by children's stories like Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, Bambi the Reckoning, and Pinocchio Unstrung. Then Jagged Edge Productions and ITN Studios officially announced that the cinematic universe, which is being referred to as the Twisted Childhood Universe, is building up to the crossover movie Poohniverse Monsters Assemble, which will be released in 2025. Now, Joe Blow's own Tyler Nichols has had the chance to talk to Chambers about their plans for Poohniverse, and during their conversation, Chambers revealed that one of the classic children's story characters will be added into the mix with this movie, which sounds like it's going to be a total bloodbath, is Mary Poppins. So let's just jump right down to some of the quotes here. Frank Waterfield explains, "It will be complete carnage. We are heavily influenced by Freddy vs. Jason and the Avengers. We would love to see a horror movie where the villains group together and are going after their survivors. We have some incredible set pieces in mind and some sequences I think will truly shock people. The movies we are working on now as standalone are all building towards Poohniverse Monsters Assemble." Chambers added, "Similar to the Avengers, we will follow Pooh, Tigger, Rabbit, Owl, Piglet, Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Bambi, the Mad Hatter, Peter Pan, and Tinkerbell joining forces to wreak havoc. We are working with a larger scale budget on this one and are excited for what the future will hold. When you see the standalone movies, you will see the Easter eggs hinting toward the crossover. Some of the villains will not see eye to eye, which will allow for some carnage within the group and some epic sequence monster versus monster." And if you haven't seen any of these films, at least the ones that are already out, If you're a horror, I mean, you're obviously watching this or you're listening to this because you're a horror movie fan. Give them a try. I think they're very entertaining for what they are. They're very surprising. And they're films that I think many of us who grew up with these characters as kids always probably wondered what it would be like to see them as a horror version or a horror take on them. I've been thus surprised by each one of them. I think they're very entertaining, but the one I'm looking forward to the most is the Peter Pan one. That one feels like a more grounded, traditional horror film. And if you haven't seen that trailer for that yet, we have a trailer review and reaction on our channel. Go check it out in the playlist. Drop a comment, let us know what you think. But that one seems very reminiscent of a traditional horror film. If someone told you it wasn't Peter Pan, and if you just stripped out the Peter Pan references in that trailer for that film, I think you would see it just as a traditional psychological thriller type serial killer horror film. You wouldn't look at it any different. But the fact that you know that it's based on Peter Pan or it's a spin of that traditional character, I think just adds a little bit more to it. So I'm excited to see what this is going to look like in 2025. I can't wait to see this trailer, knowing that we're going to have all these characters in one film, but also the fact that they're going to be fighting against each other, not just going after their victims. I think it's even a better twist to the story. And they're adding Mary Poppins to it. We haven't seen what this Mary Poppins is going to look like. Now, we've seen what Mickey Mouse looks like, The Little Mermaid, Pinocchio, Popeye the Sailor Man. I mean, we've seen, even though, and some of these aren't even part of the Poohniverse, but we're still getting horror version takes on them. So I am going to be interested to see what Mary Poppins can look like as a horror character. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for today's episode. I just want to say a quick thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. And keep the comments coming down in the comment section. We are doing our best to respond to everybody based on your questions, based on what you think, what we're covering. And let us know on today's episode, what do you think about another attempt at The Mummy? Are you looking forward to Dakota Johnson and Josh Hartnett joining Anne Hathaway for Verity and the Poohniverse? It's expanding. We're going to have a Monsters Assemble, now adding Mary Poppins. Let us know what you think down in the comment section below. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we will see you at the next one. Peace.